I never really believed in ghosts, or at least I didn't think I did. I thought the creaks of an old house, the wind rattling the windows, or even the occasional bump in the night were just things that happened. But after the first week in my new apartment, I started to feel watched. It began subtly, the tiniest noises at night. A floorboard creaking when I was sure I'd locked the door. A soft thud that made my stomach twist. I live alone, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment above a quiet street, but every night when the world outside went silent, my apartment would feel different, heavy somehow, almost alive. The first night I noticed it, I had just gotten into bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it, a scraping sound, like fingernails lightly dragging across wood. I froze, my heart hammering. I told myself it was the old floorboards. I always tell myself that. But when I tucked myself under the blanket, the sound came again, closer this time, directly from under my bed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the darkness, imagining the possibilities. I tried to reason with myself, it's nothing, you're imagining things. But even as I whispered it, my body knew something was off. Something wasn't right. Over the next few days, the noises grew bolder, not just at night. Sometimes I'd hear the softest shuffling when I was cooking, or a muffled sound while I was in the shower. I began to notice small changes in the apartment too. A book that had been on the floor now lay at an odd angle, or a mug left on the counter seemed slightly moved. I tried rational explanations. Maybe I had left it differently. Maybe I was just forgetting. But then came the night I found the hair. It was Sunday morning, and I'd stayed up far too late binge watching some crime show. I was changing my sheets, folding laundry, when I felt it. Long, dark strands of hair clumped together, hidden at the corner of my bed frame. My skin crawled. I picked it up, staring at it in disbelief. I live alone. I have no pets. This couldn't just be lint or stray hair from my own head. That's when I decided to set up a camera, just in case. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe I'd catch a raccoon, maybe the wind, maybe nothing. But I had to know. I had to understand why my home, the place I should feel safest, felt like it had been invaded. I bought a small hidden camera online, one that I could disguise as a plug-in charger. I placed it strategically under the bed, angled just right to capture the entire space beneath. I told myself I was doing this for peace of mind. I told myself I would laugh at myself in the morning. The first night with the camera, I stayed awake in bed, phone in hand, pretending to scroll, but really keeping my eyes on the dark corner where the camera sat. Hours passed. The clock ticked toward 2 a.m., then 3 a.m. Then, just as I was beginning to think I'd catch nothing, I saw movement. A shadow slid beneath the bed, slow and deliberate. I froze, my heart hammering. I first thought I was hallucinating, but the camera blinked silently, recording. The shadow moved again, this time a little closer to the edge, and that's when I saw it. A hand, pale, long fingers resting on the floorboards. My body went numb. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even think. It didn't last long. The shadow retreated, disappearing back under the bed. I stayed awake the rest of the night, trembling, my phone clutched tightly to my chest. Morning felt unreal, almost like I hadn't slept at all. When I finally dared to watch the footage, my heart sunk. There he was. A man, pale, thin, with hollow eyes that seemed to burn into the camera lens. He didn't move much, just lingered. He was filthy, like he hadn't bathed in weeks, and the way he crouched under my bed made my stomach twist. He had been living there, living under my bed. The thought made me sick. Weeks, maybe longer. Every time I felt a creak, every time I thought I heard a whisper, he had been there, watching, breathing, waiting. My apartment, the place I considered mine, my sanctuary, was not mine at all. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. I didn't want to be locked up for paranoia or for thinking a stranger could just exist under a bed in the middle of a city. I didn't know what to do. And yet, the footage stared at me from my laptop screen like a silent, accusing witness. For the next few nights, I pretended everything was normal. I moved cautiously, checking corners and closets, locking doors, triple-checking windows. But I could feel him there, watching, waiting. I knew the camera had caught him, but I didn't dare to play the footage again.
Sleep had become a stranger to me. Every creak, every whisper of wind, every faint tap on the wall made my heart spike like a drumbeat in a silent room. After finding the note under my pillow, I felt both exposed and cornered, like I was living in a cage with invisible bars. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to leave. Something, a morbid curiosity, or perhaps sheer fear of the unknown, kept me rooted in that apartment. I began documenting everything, not for anyone else, just for myself, to keep some tether to reality. I labeled files on my laptop, noises, shadows, footsteps, camera footage. Each night I recorded audio and video, even if I had no intention of reviewing it until morning. Watching the footage was terrifying, but it was also strangely grounding. I needed proof that this was real, and the footage never failed to deliver. At first, it was just him under the bed, pale, thin, crouched low, watching silently. Then, over the following nights, I started noticing subtle movements in the corner of the frame, things shifting in my apartment that couldn't be explained by drafts or floorboards. A jacket hung perfectly on the back of a chair one night, and by morning, it was draped over the armrest in a completely different way. My coffee mug would end up on the floor beside my bed, never broken, never tipped, just displaced. I began hearing more at night, footsteps that weren't mine, soft whispers that dissolved before I could catch the words. Sometimes I'd wake with a chill pressing down on my chest, like a hand I couldn't see. And then there were the smells, old sweat, damp earth, something metallic and raw. I tried to ignore them. I tried to breathe, to convince myself I was imagining it all. But even as I forced myself to sleep, my body knew he was there. I started talking to him, more deliberately this time. I'd whisper questions into the darkness. Who are you? Why here? What do you want from me? And some nights, I thought I heard answers. Not words, not exactly. More like echoes of his presence. A slight shift of air, a faint exhale, a soft murmur I couldn't understand. It was almost comforting, in a twisted way, because it confirmed he was there, confirmed I wasn't losing my mind entirely. Then came the incident with the closet. I'd been brushing my teeth late one night when I noticed the closet door slightly ajar. I was certain I had closed it. My chest tightened. I hesitated, every nerve screaming at me to run, but something compelled me to peek inside. The closet was empty. At least, it appeared empty. And then I saw the movement, a pair of dark, hollow eyes reflected in the mirror, staring straight at me. Not from a person standing in the closet, but from the floor, from the shadow beneath it. My breath hitched. I stumbled back, teeth clenched, heart pounding in my throat. When I dared to look again, nothing was there. Nothing. Just the closet door, slightly ajar, mocking me. Sleep became impossible. I began noticing patterns. He never emerged fully from under the bed, but he moved, observed, manipulated, Little things around my apartment started changing in ways that suggested he had been learning my habits, my routines. I began sleeping in the living room with the lights on, but even there I could feel him, watching, waiting, patient. I considered leaving the apartment entirely. I thought about staying at a friend's place, at a hotel, anywhere but there. But a part of me, I don't know, I felt tethered to him, to the mystery. And every time I thought about calling the police, I recoiled. What would I say? There's a man living under my bed? They'd laugh, and I couldn't handle that humiliation. Yet the idea of confronting him directly terrified me beyond reason. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I found the second note. This one was taped to the inside of my bedroom door, where I would see it first thing in the morning. It read, "Don't move, don't speak, don't make him angry. He likes it quiet." The word "he" made my stomach drop. He? Not me? Him? Who did that mean? I pressed my hands to my face and sank to the floor, shaking, trying to understand. And then it hit me. This wasn't just a man hiding. This wasn't just some intruder. This was something more calculated, more patient, more aware than I could comprehend. Over the next week, the tension escalated. I started noticing subtle signs that he had been interacting with my life while I wasn't there. My mail had been moved. A few books I'd left on my desk were now stacked on the floor. The TV would turn on at night to static, then switch off again. One morning, I found my shoes nicely lined up by the door, facing outward, as if preparing for my departure. I became obsessive. I labeled every object, set up more cameras, checked every nook and cranny of my apartment. And
by the time the third week came, I had changed. Not outwardly, at least not in any way that friends or colleagues would notice, but inside, I was different. Every sound made my heart pound. Every shadow made my stomach twist. Every creak felt like a footstep edging closer to me, closer to my bed, closer to my sanity. I stopped leaving my apartment unless absolutely necessary. Grocery runs were done in the early morning, in a frenzy of anxious speed. Mail was ignored. The phone barely touched my hand. My life had shrunk to a few rooms, a laptop, a camera, and the shadow beneath my bed. I began noticing things I hadn't before. Small fingerprints smudged across surfaces I knew I hadn't touched. Scratches along the floorboard near the bed, slight depressions in the carpet where no furniture should have been. And most unnerving of all, tiny, whisper-thin scratches along the side of my mattress, as if someone had been brushing against it, feeling for me, mapping my space. It was during one of those sleepless nights lying in bed that I realized something else. He knew my routine. Not just my schedule, but me. Every nervous twitch, every flinch at a sound, every tiny movement of my body while asleep, he was observing, learning. I could feel it in that strange creeping way that makes your skin crawl even when no one is touching you. That night, I decided to try talking to him again. My voice trembled. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, almost inaudibly. Silence. And then, a soft sigh, almost human, almost tired. The air shifted, warmer this time, heavier. I held my breath. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't move. And then I heard it, the faintest drag of movement beneath the bed, like fingernails scraping the floor slowly. I didn't sleep again. I just lay there, staring at the darkness beneath my bed, listening, imagining, spiraling. Days blurred into nights. I began marking my bedroom floor with tiny pieces of tape, mapping where he could be. It didn't stop him. Objects still moved, shadows still shifted. Sometimes I would find the corners of my blanket pulled away, as if something had been using it to shield itself. And then came the whispers. Clearer this time, almost intelligible. I couldn't make out the words entirely, but the tone was sharp, urgent, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, sometimes amused. My own voice started answering him unconsciously. "Please, don't," I would whisper, shaking. I just want to sleep." One night, in a moment of reckless curiosity, I decided to set up a new camera. One inside my closet, angled toward the bed. I stayed awake, heart hammering, willing the night to pass, desperate to see him fully, to understand what he was. Hours passed. Then, at 2:17 a.m., I caught it. A hand emerged from under the bed, long, pale fingers curling over the edge like a predator testing the water. Slowly, a head appeared, then shoulders. His eyes, dark, hollow, unblinking, locked onto mine. And then, he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a human smile. A slow, deliberate curl of lips that made my stomach knot and my blood run cold. I screamed, or at least I tried. My voice caught in my throat. He didn't move. He simply lingered there, inches from me, as if measuring my fear, tasting it, savoring it. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. The bed sagged for a moment and then returned to stillness. I was shaking, sobbing, my body trembling uncontrollably. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion, but the footage from the camera proved otherwise. There he was, pale, thin, smiling, real, terrifyingly real. After that night, I knew I could not ignore him. I could not pretend that this was a game of shadows. He was here, he was alive, and I was trapped in his world. I began noticing other patterns, subtle but unmistakable. The apartment seemed rearranged sometimes, without my consent. Small things would be missing, pens, a notebook, a shoe. I would find them days later in places that made no sense, as if he had been exploring, learning, mapping. And sometimes I felt him touch me. Not physically, but in those fleeting electric moments when you feel someone's presence so acutely you can't breathe. I started documenting his behavior obsessively. I labeled each video meticulously, marking the date, the time, and his movements. I started journaling the sensations, the whispers, the cold touches. I started losing track of what was real and what was imagined. But one thing was certain. He was aware of me, completely aware, and waiting for something I didn't yet understand. Then one morning, I discovered something that changed everything. I had been reviewing footage from the previous night when I noticed a small, almost imperceptible movement beneath the bed. The camera.
By the time the fourth week arrived, I had changed completely. I barely left my apartment, barely ate, barely slept. My entire existence revolved around the bed, the cameras, and the shadows that moved beneath it. Every night, I waited. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the air made me flinch and tense, ready for the inevitable. And then it happened. I woke in the dead of night to the faintest pressure on my leg. Not sharp, not violent, but deliberate, enough to freeze me in place. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I tried to move, to pull the covers over myself, to vanish, but my limbs refused to obey. The air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Don't come closer," I whispered, my voice shaking so badly I could barely hear myself. There was no response, only silence. The silence was suffocating. And then I felt it. His presence, right at the edge of the bed. I dared a glance downward, and there he was. Not a shadow, not a fleeting glimpse, but fully visible this time. His eyes, those hollow, piercing eyes, locked on mine. And the worst part? He was smiling. That same slow, deliberate, terrifying smile that had haunted my dreams. "Why are you here?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. His lips barely moved. He said, "I've always been." The voice was low, rasping, almost human, yet inhuman. The words cut into me, icy and precise. "I've always waited." I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My throat felt constricted, paralyzed by fear. And then I noticed the second figure, crouched just beyond him. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't exactly shadow either. It mirrored his movements, almost like a reflection, an echo of him, waiting silently, patiently. My stomach turned over. I realized then that I had not been alone all this time. That note taped to the door, the warning to be quiet, it had been for something far larger, far older, far more terrifying than a man living under a bed. I scrambled backward, finally breaking free from the paralysis that had held me. My hands clutched at the edge of the mattress, but it was useless. He moved faster than I could comprehend, sliding from beneath the bed like liquid shadow. I could see every detail now. The pallid skin, the sunken cheeks,